Welcome to Shatter.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She said it like she was offering a solution. Like it was mature. Reasonable. A week apart. Just 7 days to reset. To breathe. We'll come back stronger, she said, dropping the suitcase by the door like it wasn't symbolic. But here's what she didn't understand. This wasn't about time. This was about leverage. Control. A test she thought I'd fail by begging. By waiting. What she didn't expect was silence. And what hit her harder than absence was the realization that, by day one, I wasn't waiting for her return. It started that morning, over burnt toast and cold coffee. She sat across from me with her hair still wet from the shower, eyes locked on her phone more than on me. "I think we need space," she said without lifting her gaze. I blinked once. Space. Just for a week, she added quickly, like that would make it easier to swallow. No fighting. Just time. No raised voices. No accusations. Just that empty calm that tastes like a goodbye wrapped in courtesy. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I already knew what was coming. She was already packed. No big luggage. Just the essentials, enough to keep the illusion intact. The week was a cover story. A decoy. "I'll stay at Kara's," she said. "I just need to clear my head." Kara. Right. The same friend who'd been whispering about independence and finding yourself again over wine nights and half-baked podcasts. I watched her walk out the door with calculated lightness, like she wasn't leaving a husband, just a room. She didn't hug me, didn't even look back. But the moment the door clicked shut, something in me settled. Not broke, not cracked, just settled. Because she thought I'd crumble in that silence. She didn't know I'd been living in it for months. She thought I'd spend the week anxious, checking my phone, waiting for her to figure things out. But I wasn't waiting. No one tells you how loud peace can be until the chaos leaves. That night, I didn't stare at the ceiling. I didn't scroll through old photos or replay her words. I slept. Deep. Still. The kind of sleep that doesn't come from hope, but from certainty. Because she thought this week would make her feel free. What she didn't expect was how quickly freedom would start to feel like absence. And how absence, in the wrong hands, becomes something irreversible. By the time the silence reached her, I was already gone. Not physically. Not yet. But emotionally? I'd packed that bag long before she did. The first day passed without a ripple. She texted once, "Hope you're doing okay." I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because I didn't owe her a response. Not after the months I'd spent chasing scraps of connection while she pulled away like intimacy was some favor I had to earn. She called later that evening. I let it ring out. No voicemail. No explanation. She didn't try again. By morning, I was already operating on a different rhythm. Coffee for one. Quiet music in the background. I opened the windows. The air felt different. Not because she was gone, but because I had stopped pretending she was still here. I wasn't mourning her absence. I was reclaiming it. I cleaned the house like I was erasing fingerprints. Not hers, mine. My patterns. My routines. All the quiet little efforts I used to make to keep things together while she dismissed me with eye rolls and silences. The subtle labor of trying to matter. I threw out the almond creamer she liked. Switched back to the one I preferred. Rearranged the kitchen cabinets. The bed stayed made. Her side untouched. The silence didn't bother me. It wasn't even new. She used to sit across from me at dinner, fork in hand, phone in the other, eyes always elsewhere. I'd ask how her day was. She'd nod, say fine, and scroll. Her affection had become transactional. If I did enough, if I said it right, if I was patient, then maybe. But even then, it was maybe. Now, there were no conditions. No chasing. No tension. I was finally living in my own home again. That night, she sent another message. "Miss you." 2 words. Carefully chosen. A test, not a confession. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because if she really missed me, she'd never have left to begin with. If she valued what we had, she wouldn't have treated love like a trial subscription she could pause and return to on her schedule. She thought time apart would reset things. That after a few days, I'd soften. That silence would make me ache for her. But silence, for me, had never been the enemy. It had been a teacher. And it was teaching her now, too. By day 3, she called again. I picked up, finally. Not to reconnect, but to observe. She sounded chipper at first, like nothing was wrong. "Just checking in," she said. "Wanted to hear your voice." I didn't offer much. A few words. A neutral tone. Her voice tightened. "You okay?" Yeah, I said. Better, actually. A pause. Heavy. Loaded. She didn't respond right away. Then, okay. Well, I guess I'll talk to you later. She hung up too quickly, like she didn't know what to do with that version of me, the one who wasn't reaching back. That's when I knew the shift had started. She was the one reaching now, and getting silence in return. The very silence she had trained me to endure, now turned against her. She wanted space. She had it. But she was beginning to realize something brutal. It's one thing to ask for distance. It's another thing to find out no one's waiting on the other side. By day 4, the silence stopped being peaceful for her. She started sending little breadcrumbs. A meme. A photo of our dog. A throwback from a trip we took last fall. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I had nothing left to say. When someone walks out voluntarily, they don't get to script their return. She thought space would make her desirable again. That by stepping away, she could reset the clock, clear the tension, come back like nothing happened. But I had already seen too much. Felt too much. Lost too much of myself in the waiting. That night, I made dinner. Just enough for me. Set the table. Ate in silence. No TV. No distractions. Just the rhythm of the fork against the plate, the weight of being fully alone, and fully okay with it. And that's what she hadn't expected. My indifference. I used to orbit her. Not out of weakness, but out of hope. Out of belief in the version of us we used to be. But hope without action, without effort, without reciprocity turns into something bitter. Something quiet. Something that stops asking for answers and just walks away. I stopped checking her social media. Stopped counting the days. Stopped wondering where she was or who she was with. Because the only question that mattered now was, who was I becoming without her? I started waking up earlier. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I went for long walks. Hit the gym. Cleaned out the garage. Donated boxes of things we hadn't touched in years. Cleared out the storage room and found photos, wedding shots, vacation albums, all those fake smiles frozen in time like they still meant something. I boxed them up. Didn't burn them. Didn't rage. Just put them away. Not out of pain. Out of clarity. She texted again the next morning. Thinking about you. I stared at the screen for a while, not because I was tempted to answer, but because I realized something. She still thought she had time. That this week was reversible. That love could be paused, placed in storage, pulled back out when it was convenient again. But she hadn't noticed that while she was thinking, I was moving. She was on pause. I was in motion. By day 5, she tried calling again. I picked up. Her voice was softer this time. Less sure. She said she missed me. That the space felt weird. That she'd been journaling, reflecting, realizing how much she appreciated me. I let her talk. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to hear the script she was writing. She didn't apologize. Not really. She didn't take ownership. Just used vague language. The kind you use when you're trying to keep doors open without admitting they were ever closed. I told her I had a busy day ahead. That I'd call later. She said, okay. But I could hear the silence behind her eyes. The one that comes when control begins to slip. Because here's the thing. She thought I was passive. That my calm was weakness. That my quiet was submission. But now she was beginning to see what silence really looked like when it wasn't strategic, just final. She wanted a test. But she had no idea I was the one grading it. And by day 5, she was already failing. By day 6, she started losing her grip. Not in big dramatic ways. Not yet. It started with the pauses. Longer gaps between her messages and my silence. Shorter sentences in her calls. The change wasn't what I said, it was what I didn't. She left thinking time would soften me. But time does something different when you use it right. It sharpens. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was focused. Cold in a way that looked peaceful. And peace, when someone expects chaos, is terrifying. That morning, I closed our joint savings account. Quietly. Legally. Transferred my portion to a separate line. Not to punish her. To prepare. She had chosen distance. I was just finishing the equation. I reviewed the title on the car. Mine. Canceled her streaming subscriptions. Not all of them, just the ones under my name. Spotify. HBO. Hulu. Gone in 5 clicks. She messaged me that night. Is the Netflix account down? I didn't answer. Another message, half an hour later. Did something happen to the bank app? I can't log in. Still nothing from me. No explanation. No drama. Just the slow erosion of access. Because the mistake people like her make, the ones who treat love like leverage, is thinking the quiet ones won't leave, that they won't act, that they'll always be there, one text away. She thought I was the backup plan, but she was about to learn that even the quietest men carry scissors. That night, I looked through her social feed, something I hadn't done all week. Not because I was curious, because I was confirming. A story post from her friend's apartment. Wine glasses. Music. She was in the background. Smiling. Barefoot. Comfortable. Like someone who wasn't in a trial separation, but a soft launch into single life. That's when it clicked. She hadn't wanted a break to reconnect with herself. She wanted to test the waters. And still come home to a dry towel. She thought I'd wait on the shore. Instead, I was already on a different coast. I took a walk after midnight. No headphones. Just the sound of my steps and my thoughts. For the first time in months, I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't wondering how to fix things. I wasn't even wondering if she was coming back. Because the truth was, I no longer cared if she did. That shift was total. Irreversible. And it was happening faster than she realized. The next morning, she called 3 times. I didn't answer. She left a message, the first one all week. I feel like you're pulling away. She was right. But it wasn't a warning shot. It was a conclusion. I didn't respond. Instead, I packed a bag. Nothing dramatic. Just essentials. Just enough to reset my own environment. I booked a weekend trip alone. No one knew. No social media. No performance. Just space, real space. By the time I checked into the cabin that night, her 5th text had come through. Can we talk when I get back? Not, I miss you. Not, I'm sorry. Just logistics. A meeting invite disguised as intimacy. I let the message sit unread. And for the first time in years, I wasn't wondering what she felt. I was wondering why I ever gave someone so temporary the keys to so much of me. Because her test was never about time. It was about control. And the only thing she was realizing now was that I had finally taken mine back. By day 7, she came back. Not with an apology. Not with regret. She walked in like it was just a return from a weekend retreat. Her bag over her shoulder, hair tied back, wearing that calm expression people put on when they're hoping to skip the consequences. The first thing she said was, "So, how was your week?" I didn't look up from my coffee. She paused, waiting for some cue, a smile, a nod, an opening. She got none. She moved around the kitchen slowly, trying to reinsert herself. Humming. Making small talk. Mentioning traffic. Acting like nothing had happened. But everything had. The silence she left behind had rearranged the house. It wasn't tension anymore. It was absence. And now she was walking through a place that no longer had her name on the walls. She asked if I wanted to go for dinner that night. Said she'd been thinking of trying that new sushi place near downtown. Her tone was soft. Testing. Expectant. I finished my coffee. Set the mug in the sink. Wiped the counter. No thanks, I said. No drama. No explanation. Just no. She blinked, taken off guard by the distance in my voice. Not anger distance. And that was worse. She asked if I was upset. Said she hoped I wasn't holding anything against her. I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. She had wanted a week to herself. She'd gotten it. But what she didn't expect was that I had used that same week to strip away the illusion of who we were. Because once I stopped trying to fix us, I started seeing her for who she'd really become. And it wasn't someone I recognized. That night, she tried again. Cooked dinner. Set the table. Even lit a candle. I sat. Ate. Didn't speak. She kept glancing at me. Nervous. Fidgeting. She asked about my day. I gave a one-word answer. She mentioned how she'd been feeling a little off. That the week had been harder than she thought. That maybe they needed to talk. Really talk. I nodded. But didn't follow up. Because her words were too late, and her tone still held the same assumption, that I was waiting for her to come around. She hadn't understood yet that I wasn't in orbit anymore. Later that evening, she leaned in to touch my arm as I passed her in the hallway. I stepped aside without hesitation. No drama. No scene. Just a quiet correction of her assumption that she still had access to me. Her hand hung in the air for a second before falling. That's when I saw it, the first crack in her expression. The realization that something had changed, and that she didn't know how to reverse it. She slept facing away from me that night. But this time, it wasn't because of tension. It was because I didn't turn to follow. I stayed on my side of the bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking not about what she had done, but about how long I had let it happen. The truth was simple. I had been faithful to a memory, not a person. And now that the memory had faded, There was nothing left to fight for. She thought space would give her options. But what it gave me was an answer, and I wasn't about to explain it. Some messages don't need to be sent. They just need to be understood. The following days were filled with her attempts to restore normalcy. She started waking up earlier, mirroring my routines, brushing her teeth when I did, asking if I wanted coffee. She made small observations about the weather, the neighbors, her work calls, trying to stitch conversation out of anything. I gave her silence. Not because I didn't know what to say, because I no longer needed to be understood. She had spent months weaponizing distance. Now she was drowning in it. But it didn't stop there. I began to feel the ripple effect outside the house. Her sister called me. Casual tone. Too casual. She asked if everything was all right between us. I told her things were quiet. That seemed to unsettle her more than if I'd said we were fighting. Then came the mutual friends. 2 of them messaged me the same afternoon. Harmless check-ins. Just seeing how I was doing. Curious if we'd be coming to the next gathering. I said no. Without explanation. One of them replied, "You always were the quiet one." He had no idea how accurate that was. Because silence is easy to underestimate. Until it turns into absence. I started going out more. Gym. Late drives. Sitting alone in quiet coffee shops. Watching life go by without needing to perform for it. One night, I came home and found her sitting on the couch, dressed nicely, hair done. A movie paused on the screen. 2 glasses of wine poured. It was a scene. A setup. Like old times. I walked past it without comment. Took my shower. Ate alone. Went to bed. She followed an hour later. Said nothing. But I could feel the weight in her footsteps. The next morning, I heard her on the phone. Not loud. But just enough. She was talking to a friend. Her voice was tight, controlled. "He's just not the same." Pause. "No, I don't think there's someone else. That's not it. It's like he doesn't care anymore." Another pause. "I mean, I left for a week, not forever." I didn't expect him to just disappear emotionally. That's when I understood the depth of her miscalculation. She thought love was elastic, that it could stretch as far as she wanted, then snap back into place the moment she was ready to return. But some things don't stretch. They sever. Later that evening, she tried another strategy, nostalgia. She brought out a photo album. Old prints from our early years. Laid them out on the dining table. "I was looking through these," she said carefully. "We looked so happy." I nodded. That was it. No reminiscing. No reaching across the table. Because I wasn't interested in remembering who we were. I was busy becoming someone new. And nothing about who I was becoming needed validation from her past. That night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Muffled. Quiet. But real. And I didn't go to her. Not out of cruelty. But because those tears weren't about regret. They were about the unraveling of her control. The house felt different now. Still hers, technically. But no longer her domain. She used to fill rooms with her energy. Now, the silence was louder. And every room reminded her she was no longer the center of anything. She had expected a fight. A plea. Some declaration of love or betrayal. But I'd given her something worse. Indifference. And when the people around her started asking questions she couldn't answer, when her version of events started crumbling under scrutiny, she finally understood. This wasn't the space she had asked for. This was isolation. And I wasn't waiting in it. I had already left. By the second week, the performance cracked. Not in private. That had already collapsed. This time, it happened in front of others. We were invited to a dinner, a small gathering of old friends. She asked if I still wanted to go. I said I'd think about it. An hour before we were supposed to leave, she was dressed. Carefully. Makeup on. Hair curled like she used to when she still cared how I saw her. I stepped into the hallway and told her I'd take my own car. She paused. Asked if something was wrong. I said no. And I meant it. Nothing was wrong anymore. Everything was finally clear. At dinner, she kept reaching for my hand under the table. I let mine rest in my lap. She laughed too loud at jokes. Complimented people too often. Performed friendliness like a woman trying to make up for something. I watched. I said little. But others noticed. Halfway through the night, one of our friends pulled me aside. Quietly. Like he didn't want to be overheard. "Is everything okay between you two?" I gave a half smile. "Depends who you ask." He looked uncomfortable, like he'd stepped into something too personal. He didn't press. But later, I saw him watching her with a different kind of expression, not curiosity, but realization. Because the thing about energy is, you can't fake it for long. People sense it. They feel the gap between posture and truth. And her truth was unraveling. Back home, she confronted me. Not aggressively, just desperate enough to pretend it was casual. "You've been acting cold." I didn't answer. "You barely looked at me tonight." Still nothing. Then came the question she couldn't stop herself from asking. "Is there someone else?" I turned to her and met her eyes. "I found someone who treats me better." Her face paled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I let the silence sit, then added, "Myself." That was it. No shouting, no accusation, just fact. She stood there, trembling, not with rage, but with the first true fear she'd felt in years. Because she realized what had shifted wasn't just my behavior. It was my allegiance. I had stopped choosing her, and I wasn't fighting to be chosen back. The next few days, she spiraled in smaller, sadder ways. She began hovering in rooms I was in, sitting near me with a book she wasn't reading, asking if I needed anything, making breakfast, folding clothes I'd already folded, trying to reclaim a role she had abandoned long ago. But roles don't wait. They get reassigned. I started locking my office door when I worked from home, changed my phone password, moved my important files to a personal drive. I wasn't hiding. I was exiting. Strategically, without warning, without ceremony. She tried to reboot intimacy, brushing past me in the hallway, standing too close in the kitchen, sleeping in old lingerie like it was still currency. I gave her nothing, because I was done giving to someone who had proven she'd spend it all elsewhere. One morning, I woke up early and sat on the porch with a coffee. She joined me without asking. We sat in silence. After a while, she whispered, "I don't know who you are anymore." I nodded, and she finally understood. That was the point, because the man she left behind was never coming back. And the one sitting next to her now? He didn't belong to her anymore. By the end of that week, her rhythm had changed completely. No more casual distance. No more vague detachment. Everything became effort. She made my favorite meals, left notes near my keys, started wearing perfume again, subtle, familiar, the kind I used to compliment without her asking. But nothing landed, because none of it was for love. It was all about leverage. She wasn't trying to rebuild us. She was trying to rewind the power shift, pull me back into the frame where she was the one being chosen. Too late. One morning, I left the house without saying a word. Didn't tell her where I was going. Didn't check in. I knew she noticed. When I returned hours later, she was sitting at the dining table, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She asked where I'd been. I told her I'd been clearing my head. She tried to smile. Said, "Maybe we could go somewhere together. Like we used to." I stared at her for a long moment, then told her the truth. We don't go places together anymore. We go places alone, even when we're in the same car. She looked down, didn't respond. Because what could she say to that? She wasn't used to hearing honesty that didn't come dressed in anger or apology. She was used to fights. What she couldn't handle was indifference. Later that day, I started making moves she couldn't track. I pulled my name from shared subscriptions, transferred ownership of the utilities, scheduled meetings with a financial advisor. Not because I was leaving yet, but because I wanted to be ready when the moment came. And when it did, I wouldn't be scrambling. She still thought this was a phase, something we'd move through with time. She hadn't accepted that I was already on the other side. I started keeping a journal, not for emotion, for documentation. Each step I took, each change I made, each time she reached out and I didn't reach back. Because clarity has a way of fading when things get loud again. And I wasn't going to forget who I'd become just because she suddenly remembered who I used to be. She tried inviting me to bed again. Not for intimacy, just proximity. I declined. Slept on the couch that night. She stood at the edge of the room for several minutes, watching, waiting. Then she walked away. But not with confidence this time. With confusion. Because she was finally understanding something brutal. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't slammed a door. I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped returning. And now she was the only one left in the conversation. She began texting me during the day. Just little things. "Thinking of you. Miss hearing your voice. Can we talk tonight?" I read them. Didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of resolve. Because she wanted connection on her timeline. But I had learned something she hadn't. That love, when stretched too thin, doesn't snap back. It vanishes. And the harder she tried to grab hold of what she'd once taken for granted, the clearer it became. She was reaching for smoke. And I was already out of the fire. It wasn't some explosion. There was no dramatic night of yelling. No suitcase thrown down the stairs. No slammed doors or shattered plates. The collapse came slow, controlled, almost elegant. She began to move through the house differently, like a guest, like someone trying not to offend the owner. She started asking for permission to do things she used to decide alone. Do you mind if I start the laundry? Should I wait to cook dinner? She was testing the temperature of every room, afraid of stepping wrong, as if suddenly realizing she no longer dictated the atmosphere. The shift was complete. She wasn't walking beside me anymore. She was walking around me. One night, I came home later than usual. She was in the living room with a movie paused, wine glass full, wearing the dress she used to wear when she wanted my attention. I walked past her, headed for the shower. She said my name. Just that. Quiet. Uncertain. I turned. She asked if I had a minute. I nodded once. She didn't speak right away. Then finally, she said it. I think we should talk. The irony didn't land for her, but it echoed in me. She had used silence as punishment for so long. Now, she was begging for sound. She started slow, carefully. Said she realized she'd taken a lot for granted. That maybe she hadn't handled the space well. That maybe the week apart had opened something she didn't know how to close. I stayed quiet. She kept going. She said she missed me. Missed us. That we had something rare. Something worth salvaging. She reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. But I didn't close the gap, either. Just let the weight of the moment sit there. I told her I'd heard all I needed. That was it. No promises. No comfort. Just facts. She stared at me, eyes searching for something. Regret, maybe. Nostalgia. A flicker of who I used to be. But I didn't offer it. Because the man she wanted back didn't live here anymore. The next day, I filed the papers. Not for drama. Not to hurt her. Just for closure. Clean, efficient, silent closure. I left them on the kitchen table. Didn't say a word. Just went about my day. She found them that afternoon. I heard her pacing in the bedroom. Drawers opening, then slamming shut. Not rage, panic. Eventually, she came to find me. She asked if I was serious. I said I was. She asked if we could at least try counseling. Start fresh. I told her she had already started fresh, alone, the day she packed her bag. The rest of us were just catching up. That night, she cried. Not for what we lost, but for what she couldn't get back. Because power isn't something you notice when you have it. You only feel it when it's gone. And she was finally, painfully feeling it. I didn't gloat. Didn't comfort her. Didn't even flinch. I just sat there. Steady. Because this wasn't revenge. This was reality. She thought time apart would reset the rules. Instead, it rewrote the ending. And when people asked what happened later, why we ended, how we fell apart, she'd never be able to point to a single event. There was no affair. No shouting. No betrayal. Just distance. Chosen. Lived in. And finally, returned. She signed the papers 2 days later. No ceremony. No final plea. Just a pen scratching across paper and a silence so dense it almost had weight. I didn't thank her. Didn't smile. Didn't even nod. I just took the papers, slid them into the envelope, sealed it. That was our last shared act. Not a kiss. Not forgiveness. Just finality. She stayed in the house for 3 more days. Said she needed time to pack. I didn't ask where she was going. Didn't offer to help. She moved like a shadow, as if trying to occupy as little space as possible. I came home one evening and found the living room half empty. A few framed photos were missing from the walls. The closet had gaps where her clothes used to hang. She avoided eye contact. We barely spoke. And that was the real ending. Not the signatures. Not the boxes. The silence. Not the one we used to use as a weapon. This one was colder. Final. Honest. She left on a Thursday. I heard the door close behind her, soft. No slamming. No goodbye. Just the kind of quiet that never waits for a response. I stood in the hallway after she was gone. Not broken. Not relieved. Just still. And that's what people never tell you about the end. It doesn't explode. It drains. Bit by bit. Until you wake up one day and realize there's nothing left to save. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not my friends. Not my family. Because I wasn't looking for comfort. I was reclaiming silence on my own terms. I replaced the sheets. Cleared the fridge. Moved her things into the spare room and closed the door behind them. Then I did something small. I booked a flight. Just me. No itinerary. No company. Just forward motion. The first morning after she left, I sat on the porch again. Same cup of coffee. Same chair. Only now, the peace wasn't temporary. It was mine. I checked my phone. Nothing from her. Good. Because I had nothing left to give. No more explanations. No postmortems. Some people think closure comes in conversation. But real closure? Real closure is when you no longer need the conversation at all. Later that week, one of her friends reached out, said she was worried, that she hadn't heard from her since the move, that she wasn't herself. I didn't respond, because I wasn't the person she could call to fix her anymore. I wasn't hers. She wanted space. I gave her a continent. She wanted freedom. I gave her silence. And in that silence, her name disappeared from my mouth, her number from my phone, her photos from my memories. I didn't erase her out of anger. I erased her because she no longer fit in the story I was writing. And that's what she never understood. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. No rage. No return. Just a man, calm and cold, walking away from the fire. And never looking back. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.